The Gospel of John in the first chapter. Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip, he said, "Follow me." Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was from the town of Bethsaida. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We found the one Moses wrote about in the law and about whom the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." Gee, in Nazareth, can anything good come from there? Nathanael asked. "Come and see," said Philip. When Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said to him, "Here is a true Israelite in whom there is nothing false." "How do you know me?" And Jesus said, "I saw you while you were still under the fig tree before Philip called you." "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus said, "You believe this because I told you I saw you under the fig tree. You shall see greater things than that. For verily I say unto you, you shall see heaven open, the angels of God ascending and descending on the man of God." The word from the Lord in the house of the Lord. Sometimes it feels like the scriptures just go in every direction, don't they? Samuel was called. He was a boy. It was tradition that if you had your firstborn son was dedicated to God, which meant when Samuel was the firstborn son, he was committed to the temple, and he went to serve whoever was the attending prophet at that time. So he had no choice. He was just there, and he did whatever errands and so forth that Eli needed him to do. He was the feet, the errands and so forth were so that Eli didn't have to do a lot of things, especially since Eli had gotten old. And Samuel heard a voice in the night calling him, and he went to Eli because that's where his loyalty lay at that point. 3 times he was called. And the third time Eli said, "I'm not calling you. Next time you hear the voice, answer it. Don't answer me." There are times in our lives we don't even notice them when we're called. We don't even act surprised when something we do, we did it. And why did we do it? How many calls would it take for each one of us to respond? I know that in my case it took several because I was busy. I was a fairly successful salesperson. I had kids. I had hobbies. I had things going on. But he kept calling, and he kept calling. I'm sure I refused or denied or went another way more than 3 times before I listened. And I love Paul's letter this time. He's up in arms about all of the stuff that was going on around him. And trying to remind people to not get involved in the stuff of the world that was going on around him. And then we turn on the TV and watch the stuff that's going on around us. Or go to the movies and watch the stuff that's going on around us. It's not a pretty picture. There's things that we probably shouldn't watch unless we have a very pure constitution. I probably shouldn't watch football because there's violence and there's hatred. You watch those guys hit each other. Oh, what a terrible thing. Especially since my team's not in it, it's a terrible thing. You see, we get very, 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 very pointed about the things that we are really, really interested in. We have a favorite team. We don't very often just admire the wonders of performance. if you've been to a Cirque du Soleil, then you understand performance. They have a story, right? And it wanders through the performance. But before you get done and you watch all of these marvelous acts and all of these wonderfully talented people, you forget what the story was. So they remind you every once in a while. And then you have to remember what the name of the La Rêve is, the dream. Didn't know that. O is water. All these things are wonderful, wonderful things. And we enjoy the performance. Not particularly the message, because there isn't much of one. And Paul, or in John, we hear Jesus recruiting. Now, you people are very responsive, and I appreciate that, because most of you, all of you, when you get a phone call from the pastor or he corners you someplace, you realize that God is calling you. Don't ever forget that. When I call you, God is speaking to you. Well, maybe not quite. But we need to respond to the needs of his kingdom here. We need to respond to the needs of the people in his kingdom. The people outside of who we are here are the ones who need to be touched by Jesus. I used to talk about, when I was in Wisconsin, the rival with Baraboo was Reedsburg. And I always used to paraphrase that particular passage by what good thing can come out of Reedsburg. And now it's kind of what good thing can come out of Havasu or Kingman or Yucca, or that's probably a good one there, Yucca. What it points out in the gospel very simply is it isn't where we are, it isn't where we're from, it isn't who our parents are. He calls each and every one of us in our daily life to come and be one with him. Now, the disciples gave up everything to follow Jesus. Some of them were fishermen. One was a tax collector. There were a lot of reprobates in that collection of disciples that Jesus put together. They were not all nice people. But they came because Jesus called. They became united because Jesus called. He didn't call the angels. He didn't call the perfect. You notice he didn't call the church leaders. He didn't call the political leaders of the time. He called the people who were working with their hands, because they understood how important labor is. You're going to play in the jam session today, and your fingers will be sore by the time you get done. And a lot of people will sit there and say, like that. They won't care that you came here to church this morning. They won't care that you came last week and the week before. They're going to listen to the music that comes off the strings of a guitar, because that's what they're seeking. And so when Jesus calls us to seek something in his kingdom, we don't know what it is that we're listening for or looking for. But if we give him time, and if we give him attention, if we give him credence, he will in time demonstrate what it is he's calling us to. We have a nice partnership with people in the food pantry. It has become well enough known, and it is honored enough by people that a stranger stopped the other day and handed them $900 and walked away with no name, no glory, just gave. And that's what happens when you serve the Lord with humility, when you serve the Lord with heartfelt concern for those around. Oh, there's always smiles in the food pantry. Even when they're swamped and busy, there's still smiles. Because the people need to be not just fed with the food from the food pantry. They need to be fed with the spirit of those who are handing it out. They need to be fed with the glory that comes from people who want to serve the Lord in whatever means and manner they can, and are willing to do it joyfully. Yeah, we can watch stuff on television. We can watch movies. We can't go to Cirque du Soleil. There's none of that going on right now. You can't even play golf in California. And yet we will survive. We'll be different after we get done with this pandemic thing, because we will have learned to make some sacrifices. We will have learned how to be important in our own skin, and how we can be important to others in that same situation. Now, if you watch Channel 100, you get to watch Matt Dillon overcome all of the bad guys of the West. I like Matt Dillon. He shoots first. You watch the beginning, he draws before the bad guy does. Good idea. Good idea. We need to get ahead of the bad guys. We need to be able to serve the Lord in the way he's called us to serve. You won't respond when he calls out Samuel, but ultimately Samuel did. You're not going to respond when he calls out Nathaniel, but Nathaniel did. But he asks you to respond when he whispers in your ear or shows something that you can see that calls you to be one with him, to walk hand in hand with him, because each of us has a mission of some kind that we need to do. Fortunately, we don't all have to preach, or I'd be out of a job. But we all have to serve. That's what he called Nathaniel for. That's why he called Philip. That's why he called Peter, James, and John. That's why he called the thousands of people who heard him preach on the Sermon on the Mount. He called every one of them. Some listened. Most did not. He asked us to listen for that call in the night, that still small voice, that shout in our life that makes us different than we were yesterday, because we've drawn closer to him today. And you cannot draw too close. But he will surround you with his love. He will surround you with his care. He will surround you with his mercy, that you might do the same for everyone around you. We're called not to serve each other, but to serve all. Everyone. So listen. Listen for the call. Listen. With his smiling, he has called my name. What joy to know he knows me. What joy that he knows you. So walk with joy, walk with peace, walk with Christ.